Is a popular textbook used in our public schools on biological science, produced, by the way, at taxpayer expense in part. In the chapter on human evolution, 4 different skulls are presented to the children, which ostensibly show the gradual evolution of man from the primitive to the modern. But a close examination of these skulls reveals that they are simply 2 skulls of apes and 2 of humans with no transitions at all. What has happened to our public schools? The defense calls Dr. Walter Bradley.
I think there is no question in my mind but what the representation of origins in textbooks is very biased. I think it tends to, as I've indicated, significantly exaggerate the significance of the information, the factual information that's available on the subject, and to try to interpret that information to imply much more than it really does.
The public school. 40 million children from the ages of 5 to 18 attend these institutions. From kindergarten's ABCs to grade school grammar, to the college prep courses in high school, children spend 50% of their days learning. But is the information they receive accurate and reliable? Or are they being taught, as Dr. Bradley mentioned, material that is biased, exaggerated, or misinterpreted?
The origin of man basically evolves around evolution theory. Scientific fact has proven that all life has evolved from a single cell. And basically man has evolved from the primate. And then finally,
I would certainly feel that the textbooks today tend to lean very heavily toward a very humanistic view of man and origins, far in excess of what the data would suggest.
Dr. Walter Bradley, professor of genetics at Texas A&M, has researched the evolutionary content in high school textbooks. He has found in many cases that the books are not reflective of the true scientific data.
The people who do the scientific work are not the same people who write the textbooks. And as a result, there's oftentimes a real lag, time-wise, between the development of new scientific understanding and its finding its way into textbooks.
For instance, Dr. Bradley and others have found a number of examples in which disproven information has actually been printed in textbooks. In Biology Today and Tomorrow, printed in 1980 by West Publishing, Ramapithecus, a supposed missing link, is touted as a known ancestor of man. Yet in 1979, the scientific community disavowed Ramapithecus when it was found that it was actually an extinct orangutan. Today, high school students are still being taught this material as fact. For many years, it was believed that the Earth's early atmosphere was full of energy-rich gases which could cause reactions to produce living systems. In the last 10 years, it has become widely known that those gases were not present in great amounts, making it impossible to supposedly produce life. Dr. Bradley reviewed 14 textbooks on this material.
We found that of the 14 textbooks that were being submitted, only one acknowledged that this early assumption was no longer consistent with current scientific understanding. And let me emphasize, this is at least 7 or 8 years after people have come to recognize that that never was really the case.
There's definitely a double standard that's being practiced in evolutionary circles. The flaws in evolutionary theory have been kept pretty much as an in-house argument for decades.
Dr. Scott Morrow, professor of biochemistry, considers himself an agnostic and an evolutionist. However, Dr. Morrow finds it difficult to stand by his fellow evolutionists when he sees the obvious bias and prejudice that has been promulgated in today's textbooks.
There's an injustice being done to science when the theory of evolution is being presented as a mass of obviously true facts. And also I sense an injustice where science is concerned when there is no accommodation given to equivalently useful explanatory theories or hypotheses.
And what does the public think school children should be taught concerning evolution and these other equivalent theories? A recent AP-NBC news poll posed the question concerning theories of origins. What do you think should be taught in public schools?
I think creation should be taught in the public schools.
The study indicated only 10% of Americans polled wanted creation taught exclusively.
I only want evolution taught to my children.
8% wanted only evolution taught in public schools.
I'd say probably both approaches would be fair.
Overwhelmingly, 76% of those polled favored the teaching of both evolution and creation side by side. Yet, despite what the public says, evolution is still taught as fact. Consider some of the all too common statements high school students read each day in their textbooks.
Life began more than 3 billion years ago and has been passed on from organism to organism, generation to generation, to the present.
The human brain is, of course, the product of millions of years of evolution. The human brain to the primitive vertebrate brain.
Like other organisms, we too are the products of random process, and that as far as science can show, we are not created for any special purpose or as a part of any universal design.
These statements are actual quotes from science textbooks used in our tax-sponsored schools. Evolution is taught as fact, and evidences for creation are excluded. Why? According to Dr. Morrow, evolutionists fear what could happen if both theories were taught.
And now I think their fears are well-founded. I think if they did allow into, let's say, the public school system, a full entrance of all the information and all the criticisms that origins science involves, I think pretty clearly the evolutionists would lose, hands down.
Dear God, if you made the sun and the moon and the stars, you must have had lots of equipment. Love, Jonathan. Dear God, my daddy said we all came from monkeys. Is that really true? Love, David.
Dear God, I didn't think orange went very good with purple until I saw the sunset you made. That was cool. Dear God, are you real? Some people don't believe it. If you are, you better do something quick.
During that trial, John T. Scopes sat right here as he listened to evidence being presented on both sides of the issue. As a teacher, he symbolized the quest for academic freedom. Today, there are many other teachers who also desire academic freedom. Teachers whose views are being suppressed simply because they believe in creation. The defense presents Exhibit C, personnel file for one of the many creationists who have been fired, who have lost their positions or been discriminated against because of their view of origins. Today, you'll meet just 3 of them. The defense calls Professor Jerry Bergman.
To me, the evidence clearly points to creationism. You can see evidence of design everywhere in the living world. You can see things that simply defy evolution.
This is the older ideas.
It appears that this viewpoint may have cost Dr. Jerry Bergman his job. With 7 earned degrees, a PhD, and 21 years of successful teaching, Dr. Bergman was denied his tenure at the Bowling Green State University.
My colleagues at Bowling Green made it very clear that their objections to me were my beliefs, especially in creationism. They stressed over and over that one who believed that God created us is like one who believes in the flat earth theory, that there's something wrong if you believe that God created us, that evolution is proved, it's fact. We did not get here by creationism. We got here by natural selection, by the process of evolution. Therefore, if you accept creationism, there's something wrong with you.
But it's just so unfair to see this happen to a fine young man whose credentials were impeccable, whose education was impeccable, and whose leadership at the university at that time was just unquestioned until he began to challenge the evolutionary hypothesis, and that cost him his job.
They can do that legally. They can deny tenure for any reason they want to, except, theoretically, your religion, your race, your nationality, or your sex. But they do all the time. In fact, studies have shown that tenure is often denied on the basis of illegal grounds. But they can cover that fairly easily. They can say, well, it wasn't Dr. Jones's race. We didn't object to that. It was something else.
Dr. Bergman found that he was not the first person that had been denied tenure under the guise of something else. After intensive research, Dr. Bergman published a book citing case after case of creationists who lost their degrees, their jobs, and had their tenure denied, all because of their beliefs.
I have yet, and I've spoken about this at probably a dozen conventions, I have yet to find a single out-of-the-closet creationist who has earned tenure in any state university in America, ever. Not one single one.
As a result, I think on all of our university campuses today, we have a lot of closet creationists. And many people are advising young men, if you're going into a PhD program, don't volunteer this information, because if you do, in most of our universities, they'll turn you down and won't let you into that PhD program.
Unlike Dr. Bergman, Robert Farwell is not a university professor and has not lost his job. But Mr. Farwell does share the same haunting sense that he is being discriminated against for his beliefs as a creationist.
About 3 years ago, I started teaching a pilot program in earth science at the high school level. As I did so, I implemented a two-model approach to any topics that dealt with the origin situation in science.
When the school administration at Raytown High School in Raytown, Missouri, discovered what Mr. Farwell was teaching, both evolution and creation, the director of curriculum sent a memo to him stating that any instructional materials you use in the classroom must be consistent with textbook materials purchased by the school district.
Well, of course, the viewpoint of the textbook is solely evolutionary. There is no balanced treatment whatsoever. And that's where I've decided that I cannot do that I would continue to teach what I thought was a fair treatment of the origins issue.
When I've heard him speak on both of the issues, he's very convincing for both sides. He does not favor, if you ask him whether he's a creationist or an evolutionist, he will state that he's a creationist. But I really feel that he proposes both sides of the story equally.
Now, he has been told by his principal and some other authorities there that if he doesn't stop telling about these alternate ideas of origins, that he'll be out of a job, that they'll have to let him go.
But according to a recent Supreme Court decision, Mr. Farwell's job should not be in jeopardy. Although the Supreme Court struck down the Louisiana Balanced Treatment Act requiring teachers to teach both theories of origins side by side, the court also clearly stated that teaching a variety of scientific theories about the origins of humankind to school children might be validly done with the clear secular intent of enhancing the effectiveness of science instruction. Attorney Wendell Bird explains.
Well, the Supreme Court in Edwards v. Aguilar left no doubt that teachers have the constitutional right to teach a variety of theories besides evolution on the subject of origins. There is the open door, the permission from the Supreme Court. Teachers now need to do what the Supreme Court allows, teach alternative views. That's precisely what academic freedom involves, giving students a full range of evidence rather than just one narrow area of the evidence where they can make their own choices.
The events of the last several years of my life have really brought out some interesting facts with regard to how the scientific community is going to react when evidence for creation is presented to them.
The last several years have been eye-opening for Dr. Robert Gentry. For 13 years, Gentry held a government-funded guest position at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. According to his colleagues, his credentials in his area of research were outstanding.
Bob Gentry is one who's been respected. He's respected worldwide. I think he's considered a world authority on this. He's known in Russia, Europe, and all over the United States for the work he's done in pleochroic halos.
I have not known anybody that downgraded Bob's work. They thought his work was exceptional. In the area of pleochroic halos, Bob is the #1 scientist in the world, really.
Gentry published many of these findings which supported creationism in the open scientific community. As a result, Dr. Gentry was asked to testify at the Arkansas creation trial in December of 1981, a trial testing an Arkansas law which mandated the teaching of creation science alongside evolution in the public schools.
I went to the trial, presented the evidence that I had published. In fact, evolutionists there were asked to comment upon the evidence that I had been publishing in the open scientific literature. They didn't have any response, they didn't have any answer at all for the evidence for creation. It stood unrefuted at the end of the trial.
There seemed to be, after he testified in some of the open trials on creationism, there seemed to be a change in attitude towards him. And it wasn't too long after that that his contract was terminated.
I think the lab lost an asset when Bob left. Bob was developing a field and has continued to develop a field which the laboratory ought to be interested in.
Gentry is continuing his research, but no longer at the multi-million-dollar facilities of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Instead, Robert Gentry, a scientist known internationally for his outstanding contributions, now does his research out of a basement laboratory.
There's no doubt in my mind that where I am today and doing my research here in the basement of my home is a direct result of my espousing the evidence for creation, not only in the open scientific literature, but in bringing it out to the public at the Arkansas trial and making it clear to my scientific colleagues that I'm challenging the very basic fundamental premise on which they're working on. Yes, I'm here today because I'm a creation scientist and not an evolutionist. If I were an evolutionist, I'd still be out at that laboratory, I do believe.
Robert Gentry, Robert Farwell, and Jerry Bergman, three men who seek only fairness and balance, yet have been unquestionably censored from the public forum. For the most part, judges and courts have ruled against creation science being allowed in the public schools. This rejection climaxed when the Supreme Court on June 19, 1987, struck down the Louisiana law that mandated balanced treatment, the teaching of both models of origins. In his brilliant dissent, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote, "In this case, however, it seems to me that the court's position is the repressive one. The people of Louisiana, including those who are Christian fundamentalists, are quite entitled, as a secular matter, to have whatever scientific evidence there may be against evolution presented in their schools, just as Mr. Scopes was entitled to present whatever scientific evidence there was for it." Justice Scalia is correct. What the creationists want, by and large, is not that their view alone be taught, but both sides. Evolutionist and agnostic Scott Morrow highlights the danger of continuing to allow only one view of origins, evolution, to be taught in our schools.
Exposure to the theory of evolution ultimately will make people atheists. I believe they will not just be atheists, but they will be rabidly anti-Christian and anti-ethical by any rational standard.
Public schools are public schools. They're there for the general public with a diversity of views. An odd phenomenon that's happening today is that everybody likes pluralism, but they don't like any pluralism for the religious side of the spectrum or the conservative side of the political spectrum. That's not right. Fairness means teaching all views on any subject rather than indoctrinating in a few selected views that happen to be preferred by liberal public school administrators. In the subject of origins, fairness means teaching all of the scientific evidence, not just some.
And now, in summation of all that we've seen and heard, what have we learned? First of all, the defense has presented experts who have shown that the 130-year search for fossil remains have produced no transitional forms at all. Secondly, we have presented scientists who have demonstrated that the mathematical probabilities of evolution having taken place are zero. Thirdly, we've seen that in our textbooks, all of the scientific information supporting creation has been removed. In fact, whatever information is presented, it's always presented in a way to support evolution, even information and evidence which doesn't in actuality support evolution. Fourthly, there is a matter of discrimination. Instructors, professors, and researchers are being fired from their jobs, removed from positions, and their views are being censored simply because of their belief in creation. My friends, this has to stop. You have been the jury. You've heard the case for creation. You must decide. Remember, Clarence Darrow was right. It is the height of bigotry to teach only one view of origins. That bigotry needs to end. The trial of history has not been kind to evolution. In fact, the whole theory is in chaos today. It is increasingly being discovered that evolution is not based upon scientific fact, but rather upon experiments that will not come off, on missing links that will not be found, on fossils that are fraudulent,